All right, folks, time to talk about the second case. This one had to do, the title is The Price of Quality. Anyway, this had to do with Cazzolis Pizza. By the way, the name's changed here a little bit. Wasn't actually spelled like this. But anyway, Dennis Collins, he owned 5 of these pizzerias in South Florida. And they were very successful. Now, most of them were in malls. So this was back when malls were super popular in the United States. And they were very busy locations. Now, what was interesting, and I actually was the general manager of these 5 locations, eventually became the general manager. Anyway, we served a very good, very quality product, okay? So people used to love to come and eat by us. They would sometimes come to the mall just to come have our pizza and just to come have our different Italian foods, okay? So we served really good quality product. Now, Dennis was a former Marine, and he was very particular about how the business was run, how clean it was. The one thing that I think would probably eventually created some problems for him was he was always concerned with, he wanted to make money. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what happened at one time, this was a number of years ago, what happened one time was that the price of cheese, which there's like a cheese market, and the price of cheese was increasing to the tune of 20-25%. Now, in the pizza business, and especially in Italian foods, you use a lot of cheese, especially mozzarella or mozzarella-based cheeses, okay? Now, we happen to use a brand called Polio, which was at that time considered one of the top 2 brands. So it wasn't cheap, but the price kept going up and up and up. Now, because of the volume, and I'll show you some of the numbers here, because of the volume of cheese that we used, the price going up 25% made a pretty significant difference in the amount of money you were going to make, okay? Unless you were willing to change your prices. And we were trying to hold, basically what happened here, we were trying to hold the prices, and in doing so by going to a less expensive cheese. Now there's a couple of problems that we ran into, okay? All right, so first the price was going up. Okay, so here if you take a look here, price of mozzarella cheese increased 25%, okay? By the way, this cheese would come in these 6-pound blocks. They were like, imagine like a loaf of bread. And you had to cut them in half. And then we had these big mixers, where we would mix these big batches of pizza dough. And they had an attachment that went on the front, and that attachment had a grinder. So you used to have to take these big blocks of cheese and grind them by hand. So not only was it expensive cheese, it was also labor intensive, okay? Well, there was this company that had constantly tried to get business from Dennis, and the company's name was Arpin Cheese, okay? So the sales representative came with 20 pounds of cheese, and Dennis and Scott, which is me, got all the managers together, and they made pizzas and various dishes with this cheese to see how good was this cheese, what did it taste like. Well, the cheese that they got when they ran the tests seemed pretty good. I mean, not quite as good as Polio, but still really pretty good. So we're like, wow, maybe we should just go ahead and save this money. And besides the cost per pound, this particular cheese was going to come already diced. So it's pretty common to see it now. But a number of years ago, it wasn't common to see cheese diced that way. You used to have to do it by hand, right? Well, the problem was when we went and tested the cheese that we had used for the test was originally block cheese from the other company that they had ground up for us by hand. However, when we actually got the cheese, the new replacement cheese, it was done by machine, and then it was packed in a bag with some sort of gas in there. And unfortunately, this was at the beginning when they were just learning how to do this. Whatever they did when they gassed that cheese, the cheese, instead of, like I'm sure you know when you see a pizza, how it's all melted and flowing all over, this almost, it when it melted, it almost melted like a wax dot. And you could literally, like, it didn't flow together. And it also, the taste was not nearly as good. So the first problem when looking to save the money, number one, when we tested the cheese, this is problem one. When we tested the cheese, we didn't test the actual cheese that was done by machine. We tested the machine that was done by hand. Then Dennis went and signed a 3-month contract to provide cheese for all of our locations for 3 months. Now the problem was when we made that swap over to the new cheese, I remember that day really well. What happened was the pizza maker that I had, his name was Sal. He was very experienced, and we made the opening pizzas, and he's looking at them, and they don't look right because the cheese isn't flowing all over. It's kind of melting like in splotches, right? And it didn't feel right, didn't smell and feel right. Anyway, so Sal ate a slice of the pizza and came to me, and he's like, Scott, this does not taste like what we normally put out, our pizza. Well, as it turns out, what wound up happening was that we ran the pizza, and for a couple days, now we never used to get complaints about our food. People love the food. And I used to walk through the dining room talking to clients and everybody's, hey, this stuff is really good, blah, blah, blah. You know, like they were very happy. Now, as I walked through the dining room, I was hearing complaints. And that was not something that was usual for us. So that was a huge problem. So the idea here was we're trying to save money for the price of the cheese, trying to save labor for not having to grind the cheese. But now all of a sudden, our clients aren't happy with the product. So that's why the idea is the cost of quality. Okay? So let's see here. There are some numbers here. In this particular case, there are some numbers. Okay, so notice here, customer response. This is when, now first, early in the morning, we used to get these school kids that would come in. Now they didn't say too much because they're young. But when regular lunchtime hit and the normal crowd that would come for lunch came, these were older customers that have been coming there for a long time. They knew the difference right away. Okay? And that became a problem because people, you know, they're complaining about the quality of your product. That's not a good thing. So down here, let me show you some data. So you could see here, this was the store that I was in most of the time, Plantation Mall. By the way, all of these names are changed here. But look how many pounds we used monthly. Look at how many hours you saved, you know, when you were grinding cheese. 53 hours a month grinding cheese, and then $10. So you could see there was a significant savings, and then there was a savings at about 50 cents per pound for the cheese. Okay. Now, ultimately, what wound up happening here, and if you look, so for the average pizza, we used 1.5 pounds of cheese. So 1.5 pounds of cheese at 50 cents a pound, it's about 62 cents. And here's the average price, selling price per pizza, and the average selling price per slice. And then our normal food cost was about 24%. Okay. So you could take a look at these numbers here. And actually, so what wound up happening was we had to make a decision. We were trying not to raise the price of the pizza and instead just use less expensive product and save labor. Ultimately, what wound up happening was that we wound up canceling this contract. The problem was the company's cheese was not bad. But when you factored in getting it, and a big part of this was trying to save labor as well, when you wound up using this gas-packed cheese that didn't melt properly, that was a big problem. So ultimately what wound up happening was that we decided to switch back to the other cheese, and then we calculated how much more we would have to charge per pizza and per slice. And frankly, what wound up happening, even though we went up with the price of the pizza, the customers were happier to pay another 15 cents or so slice per pizza to have good pizza than they were to get it at a cheaper price, but it wasn't so good. Okay? So essentially that's what wound up happening in this storyline. Okay? So the question is, what do you do? What kind of decision do you make? How important, and by the way, this is a quote here, never change the product. You can lose a customer for price, you get them back. If you lose them for quality, you lose them forever. Okay? And that particular quote, Sal told me that, but it actually had come from the maker of Polly-O cheese. All right, folks, that's the essence of this case. I'll be back to go over the teaching notes or what to do about the teaching notes in just a moment.